What's happening? What's going on?
You look like you need a hug, but you're not gonna get one from me. Better get lost.
Don't crap yourself. He likes to kill demon things.
You dumb one-armed son of a bitch, you're gonna die!
Cheer up, crew cut. Taking notes?
Hell hath no fury like a Dante scorned. Or Nero, or V, or Nico. Well, there's a collection of them in this game. Yes, Devil May Cry is back with the 5th entry, the true entry in the series, and Capcom have delivered yet again with the RE engine. What we have on offer here is the Xbox One X and the Xbox One S version, which has been provided to me as a review code from Capcom. I unfortunately cannot cover the Pro and the PS4 and the PC version just yet, but I've already covered that in detail in the demo analysis, and to cut a long story short, nothing has really changed from that. The performance levels there of the Pro and the PS4 and the actual resolution is likely to be absolutely identical, because that's pretty much what we're seeing here on the X and the S. But we obviously have a lot more to look at and a lot more to test in the final game. So what are those differences and what is the performance? Well, the actual game, the engine, and the brilliance that is on offer here from Capcom has been covered in my detailed technical analysis, which centres just solely on the game itself, all the visual features of the engine, the improvements over previous versions, and it's very in-depth and all-encompassing. That'll be up tomorrow or maybe later this week at the weekend. I'll get it up as soon as possible. The link will be in the video here. But this one centres solely on the performance, but you can jump over to my demo analysis and tick off the box of what the Pro and the PS4 runs like, because it's going to be exactly the same. This will transfer over. That fundamentally means the PS4 Pro was the slightly better performing of the lot, with the S being worse, and that's been carried out here. The X is just behind, but obviously resolution is higher. So what about those areas of resolution and performance? Well, the Xbox One S here runs a native 1920 by 1080, again like a demo, but it is likely using an improved method of their reconstruction element, which we've seen before in the RE engine. All geometry comes out as native, with reduction and dithering evident in the shading. As per my Resident Evil 2 analysis, this may be a combination of EQAA recon and then a reduced or checkerboarded shading to make up the deficit. To be clear though, I'm not seeing any signs of checkerboard rendering per se, more the cutbacks and the shading sacrifices that are making up the overall image quality. Now, the post effects and other buffers, as always, are reduced from this, and the X1S is the lowest of the lot, with DOF running at a quarter resolution of that output 1080p limit. The X, by comparison, looks to only be half resolution on these points. This intelligent utilisation of the resources helps deliver a sharp and gorgeous game on all platforms, even if the cinematics should still be locked to 30 FPS, as they are in that region more often than not on all versions. They are incredible to watch though. Now, shadow maps are of a much lower resolution and lose the filtering, or at least there's hardly any filtering present due to the low resolution of these, which leaves them very stifled and noisy on the S here. Now, the X suffers from this also, but it's not as bad due to the high resolution. Now, this improvement to resolution affects everything, all the shadow filtering and texture filtering. It might be slightly higher on the X, but really most of the improvement comes from the resolution boost from the S, because that just improves sampling rates and therefore you get better image quality. The cascade range of shadows looks almost the same, and it's not really as noticeable as the filtering improvements are on the shadows themselves. Other effects, such as the temporal AA, are obviously reduced on the S over the X, and this was true of the PS4 over the Pro, which I covered in the demo version, which highlights that some of the cutbacks are made here to increase fidelity. People say that things like AA are low quality, but when you're looking for milliseconds on a 60 millisecond frame, every little bit counts. So taking back that pass just gives you back a little bit. Most of the time in rendering nowadays is all of the post effects added on top of the image. So things like post effects AA and temporal AA all take away those extra milliseconds, and it's very important for a title that targets 60 FPS. The image is still very, very good on the S, even on a 4K screen. Clean with excellent detail, but the raised shimmer and sub-pixel noise do add up to a worse visual package than any other version. It is good to see the AA is toned down on the X from Resident Evil 2, so the image is much sharper for it, with the same sacrifice to stability. Now this may actually be slightly changed from the demo, as I did spot a few points where it looked ever so slightly better, but nothing revolutionary if so. Cutbacks can also be seen, like I say, in the alpha coverage and shading passes. The S is certainly running a reduction here, but due to the reduced AA, it can look great at times and then very aliased in others. The abundant hair in the game and excellent use of it, it can be an obvious one with Dante's grey locks standing out with flicker and pop on the base Xbox. The X looks superb here with a mostly sharp and stable image that really excels at points in the story and those magnificent cinematics. It's also the point where you notice the low resolution effects, alpha effects, the depth of field like I've just mentioned. On the S over the other versions, they stand out a little more because you get time to admire them. Now this is not to say the S is bad, in fact the opposite. It looks great and is one of the best images and results I have tested on this aging console. But up against the others, and certainly the PS4 and obviously the X and the Pro, then even the most uninterested player will be aware of those pixel gaps. So on to the big split then, performance. Well, again, as I covered before, cutscenes are the worst. They simply are the worst. So I've said it before, I'll say it again, it would make far more sense to just cap these at 30 FPS. But we obviously have to think about the fact that this is a game designed for PC as well. So if you cap them to 30, it would be extra work. So uncapping them here means PC will obviously get 60 FPS as a minimum. But on the consoles, including the X and the Pro, they struggle to hold anywhere near 60 FPS. They're very, very heavy on GPU load, things like depth of field, post-processing, alpha, particles, obviously geometry, detail, subsurface scattering, but I cover all this in my analysis, but it explains why relatively performance can be bad. So these examples do show you how beautiful the game is on every version. But aside these more examples, I've reset the average back to just cover gameplay only, not cutscene. You can see the identical performance metrics from the demo here to the X, so there's no change at all, it performs identical. There is one minor spoiler warning here though, so I'm just going to mention it in case anyone goes mad. I am showing some gameplay of fighting here from the characters, so if you completely don't want to know that you're going to be playing as one character with a certain type of fighting ability, then don't watch the next few minutes of frame rate analysis. Again, it's very, very minor spoilers, but there's characters in this game that you play as, just so you know. So that aside, there's a bit at the beginning, a bit at the end which won't affect you. You know that you're playing as Nero and Dante, so you should be safe to watch. So performance wise, it does suffer in certain elements of the title. The Pro and the X from my demo, and again here, were very good and close to 60 FPS more often than not, certainly more often than not. The averages point to that. There are points certainly later in the game which gets very heavy, where you can see some dips down into the low 50s and even the high 40s. 99% of the time they stick at that 33 millisecond frame time as a ceiling, but occasionally the X can dip into the 50 milliseconds mid gameplay, but it's very minor. So backing up the results I covered in my demo analysis, the S is the worst. It regularly sits under 60 FPS and it can average around 50 FPS, probably worse at certain points, but it's the way it is. It feels good and smoothish, but you can certainly feel that judder, that consistent 33, 16 millisecond spikes that keep going on all the time, and no matter what you're doing, as soon as you're fighting anything or seeing anything on the screen, it's dipping. It just doesn't hold 60 FPS. It's the worst of the lot, but it's not terrible and you can still enjoy the title. So the last thing to cover is obviously controller inputs, important for a title like this that, you know, it revolves around stringing combos together, attacks, dodge, moving. It's great, it's Japanese feel, it's literally back to all the games that I grew up playing and I love playing, because it doesn't forgive you. It doesn't give you huge telegraph moves and seeing when an enemy's going to take you from behind. It literally just says, go out there and do your worst. If you get hit, well then it's on you. But you can do things like defend against attacks. Timing is vitally important in Devil May Cry titles, and again here. And all the additional combinations, all the moves, all the additional elements you can buy and boost and move your way through. And remember, there's 3 characters here to improve on. It's very, very different play styles, and you have to get used to that. But once you do, you really pick a favourite. My favourite's clear, is Dante. He plays the best for me, but Nero is a close second. He's absolutely excellent. So certainly try out and use all of those elements and use those red orbs to buy as much as you can and boost the player quality, because that is what the game is about. Gameplay is front and centre, and it's brilliant. So, input controller times, what are they like? Well, very, very good, but again, this is the best case scenario. If you're getting a moment where it's dipping down heavily, again, we're talking 16 milliseconds of dips here, then you can get a few points where it's dropping down. So on the X and the S, comparing the two together and obviously taking into account around 20 milliseconds of input lag on the TV, we're seeing a high of 76.2 milliseconds and a low of 59.5 milliseconds. So that's a mean or an average of 67.9 milliseconds input time. That is excellent and vital. It's crisp and responsive, but obviously it will make an effect on how your TV is set up. I say that time and time again, so just remember that. Make sure you've got your TV set correctly. If you don't know anything else, just stick it in game mode. It's the best way. It might look a bit crap, but it will certainly control better, and that's important for a Devil May Cry title. And this is certainly a Devil May Cry title. That's it for now, but I'll be back very soon with a full and in-depth analysis away from all the frame rate and performance to look at just how great this is and how much we are seeing from the RE engine. It hopefully will be interesting, and I'll keep it as spoiler-free as possible. But for now, you can be safe in the knowledge that Devil May Cry 5 is all and more you ever hoped it could be. I'll catch you on the next one.